Most sewing patterns teach you how to make one garment. The Keystone system is designed to teach you how garments are actually built. Over the last few years, I've been trying to create something that goes far beyond individual sewing patterns. The goal has always been to break down traditional construction techniques, remove the gatekeeping around garment making, and give you the confidence to tell your own stories through the clothes you create. Today we're building the brand new Keystone shorts. This is a fully modular pattern built around traditional workwear construction, giving you the freedom to choose your own combination of front panels, fly systems, back pockets, yoke configurations, utility details, all from the same core pattern. Throughout this workshop, I'll walk you through the entire build from start to finish, explaining not only how to sew each step, but why it's done that way. Along the way, I'll share the techniques I've learned over the years of making workwear, helping you build cleaner, stronger garments whilst understanding the construction behind them. If you prefer a faster build, I've also released a condensed 30 to 40 minute POV version of this tutorial. It follows the same pattern using imported Japanese denim, but moves at a much quicker pace. Choose whichever style suits the way you want to learn. The Keystone shorts also sit alongside the Keystone denims, with the Keystone jacket completing the series in the near future, allowing every project to build on the skills you already have learned. Oh, and one final thing. This tutorial isn't perfect. I don't want it to be. We're testing a new camera setup, a few things didn't quite go to plan, and I've left some of those moments in. Sewing is rarely perfect, and I hope seeing those moments gives you the confidence to keep going when your own projects don't go exactly as planned. So, grab your fabric, print your pattern, make yourself a coffee, and let's build something you'll genuinely be proud to wear. So hello everybody and welcome back. This is a brand new tutorial, a brand new rough cut pattern. If you know what you're doing with these rough cut patterns, the first 10 minutes of this video you might want to skip through. But essentially this is the brand new Keystone denim shorts. It's a new pattern on the website, a brand new rough cut pattern, and it is to make a pair of these shorts right here. You would have just seen them in the intro. Essentially, I did have some fabric coming and it was some salvage Japanese denim, but unfortunately it hasn't turned up on time. So I'm using a lot of the same fabric that I used in the previous tutorial for the field jacket that was released as the last 3 videos on the YouTube channel. This is mud dyed fabric. It takes almost 12 months to cure. And then this is some washi Japanese paper mixed fabric. So it's like 50% paper, 50% fabric, which is pretty nuts. Anyway, in today's video, I'm going to take you through exactly how the pattern pieces, the paper patterns and all of that work. This pattern is a little bit different because it actually has a handbook with it, rather than it being the same as all of our other patterns where you basically print the pattern and it has all the starting pages and all of the finishing pages. So this handbook will take you through everything you need to know about the shorts, all the seam allowances, all of the layered sizing and everything within the pattern which is interesting to mention. So this is like the booklet you read all the way up until when you cut your fabric. And if you read this and take everything in and understand the full pattern, then you should be able to cut your fabric perfectly and then carry on from the sewing part of this video. This is a modular pattern and I'm going to showcase that actually in the booklet in a second. I'm going to take you through all the different sort of pathways you can go down to create this pair of shorts. There is different pockets to choose from, there's different back yokes, there's different front pieces that you can pick to be able to put pleats in the front or not put pleats in the front. You probably heard that in the intro too. So basically I'm going to show you through this booklet. Then I'm going to show you very quickly how to tile these pages because a lot of people tend to still get this wrong. And then I'm going to quickly show you a new system that we've added to our sewing patterns over the last week, which is brand new to this pattern specifically. And then we're going to get straight into cutting the fabric and getting on with doing the tutorial. I've got a specific route that I'm going down with this pair and I've cut out all of the panels so I can explain that route when I get to it. So without further ado, let's get straight in and I'm going to show you the handbook. So this right here is the handbook for the Keystone shorts. We've got a little exploding photo in the sort of middle. It says what it is. And then this is a skill level 3 out of 5 on our patterns. So it's for confident hobbyists. This is kind of accounting for the fact that you've probably had a bit of prior experience before making these. I do have patterns that are skill level 1 all the way up to skill level 5. So if you feel more confident, go back to like one of my older patterns make one of the free patterns like the tote bag or the kit duffel bag and then come back to this one after, because there's a lot of techniques that I may not explain perfectly in this tutorial that I would in the other tutorials. And then again, this is graded from 28 all the way up to 44-inch waist. Anyway, I'm going to take you through these pages. For some reason, I've had a little print error. Anyway, you've got a contents page, and then it says understanding the Keystone shorts, and then it basically just goes through the whole system of, you know, how you can pick your front system, your fly system, your pocket system, your back system, your waistband system, and then you should have finished shorts. A new part that I've added to this pattern is down here, and that is every pattern piece is given a unique code. So on every pattern piece, it should have something similar like KSS027, and that just helps you read this booklet, and then you're able to go back and know that you're sort of grabbing the right pieces for your project. It corresponds with the pieces. So if I grab a piece like the waistband here, you can see it says KSS019, and then in the booklet I will talk about the waistband as the coded sort of, you know, number and letter system. So it just makes it easier for you guys. And yeah, there is multiple routes on the back pockets. You don't need to sew every option. All of the paper that you're going to be cutting out for this project is, you know, some of it's optional, some of it is like really important to the system. And then some pattern pieces may look confusing when flat, but then it just, you know, again, when they're sewn together in a certain way, they all make sense. And then this says something which I can't read right now, but you'll be able to. It says front style, so you've got non-pleated, so there's on the front panel piece you can choose non-pleated, or you can go for that pleat on the front. There's two variations to this front which you can pick from. You can go for your fly style, so you can either make a button front fly or you can make a zipper front fly. And then the back pocket system down here, you can either go for a classic pocket, a rough cut pocket, or a workwear pocket. And these have kind of similar constructions. Obviously the classic pocket is a little bit easier, and then the other pockets have just different sort of details for like pen pockets and stuff like that. And then at the bottom you've got the yoke system. So you've got the standard yoke, and then you've got the buckle yoke. The buckle yoke is basically the signature sort of yoke style that we've added to this pattern. And when we get there, I will show you exactly how to do that in this video. The next page goes into the actual sort of categories of patterns. So when you're actually cutting out your pattern out of the paper, I like to categorize all the panel pieces which I'm going to sew together first. So this kind of helps you when you're cutting out. You can, like, you know, rip this page out and keep it next to you. And then for the front systems, when we get to sewing like the pockets into the front panels and doing the fly, it basically just shows you what panel pieces you need to put aside for the front system. It shows you what panel pieces to put aside for the fly system, all of these, and then for the back system the same, and then for the pocket system on the back the same down here too. And then it goes through all of this in detail individually. So the front system, what panels you're going to need, it shows you the build order, and it shows you all of the coded sort of pattern pieces you're going to need and what they're used for down here. So you've got the KSS1 classic front, or you've got the KSS2, which is the pleated front, and obviously you can choose which one you want there. And then you've got the same thing for the fly system, the same thing for the back system, and the same thing for the waistband system. The waistband system's a little bit different. We've got a new type of waistband in this video. Let me just quickly talk to you about that. So the waistband has two variations of how to build it, and I just want to explain it now, and I'll also show you when I get to that part of the tutorial. But essentially, there's the option for normal belt loops within this pattern, and you can add, what, 5 or 6 of them around the sort of like waistband wherever you desire. Alternatively, there is a diamond belt channel that runs through the waistband. So if you come around here, I can show you exactly what that means. But here you have markings on your pattern piece, and these markings are indicating where these diamonds are going to be placed. And if you come into the page, you should have a pattern piece just like this. It's KSS20, and it's the diamond belt channel facing and guide. So you basically cut out this diamond within this square, and you want to maybe cut out, let's say, 5 or 6 of them out of your fabric, and then you're basically sewing the good side of that diamond belt channel facing to the good side of one side of your waistband, and then you can turn it inside out and do all that sort of thing. But we're going to get there and show you that in the tutorial. It basically just creates an internal belt loop in the waistband. So it means that if you sort of have a belt, the belt runs through the waistband rather than running through belt loops externally added on the outside. It's a really cool sort of system that we've added. And then right at the top of this waistband, we've added this little system up here. It says cut here for a normal waistband. So you just cut all this excess away, and then you wouldn't have these two sort of fishtail waistband areas up the top. These are originally made for suspenders to be able to connect it to the back of the trousers, and then you'd connect them to the front on the buttons. It's pretty much just for show. I've done it on this example pair too, and I've also done it on the old Keystone jeans if you've watched that tutorial. Anyway, that is the waistband. I'm going to show you how to do that when we get to that part of the system. So another sort of really cool system within this pattern, which we don't and have not done on any of the others, is the layered selection. So when you open this PDF on anything like Adobe Acrobat or another software to read PDFs, you should be able to choose the layers that you want to turn off. So it goes, obviously this is an example, but it says 34, 36, 38, and you can actually turn off all of the other sizes within this sewing pattern, which is really, really nice. On some of our other sewing patterns, you've just got about 7 to 8 different sizes layered on top of each other, and you've kind of got to decode which line you're cutting out for your desired size. But now you can actually go onto the Adobe Acrobat sort of PDF, you can turn off the sizes which are not your size, and then you can print your desired size. And that should look something a little bit like this right here. I'm following the 34 direction just down here, which is this sort of dashed line right here. And then as you can see, all of the dashed lines are the only thing that's showing, which is my desired size. And then all of the one size fits all sort of panels, like this Fly's Keystone 07, they're all just solid black lines, and they will be for your size too. So cut out all of the solid black lines as the one size fits all panels. They're all universal across all panels. And then all of, you know, your sort of matching size will just be the only sort of line showing, and then you can cut it out. I think this is a really nice quality of life feature, because I know how much of a pain in the arse this is to just cut out your desired size, and sometimes you'll get it wrong and cut out the wrong size. So it's the first time we've ever done this for a sewing pattern, but we are thinking of going back and changing all of the old sewing patterns. It's just not annoying, and it really helps for people that are doing the A0 projector files. So if they're downloading the A0 and want to project it from above onto their fabric, it's easier for them to know what they're cutting out. Anyway, back to the booklet. So the next page is the printing your pattern. So we've obviously got 3 different variations. We've got the A4, the US letter, and the A0 format. The A4 is for most of the world. This is what I've printed right here on my booklet. You have the US letter, which is normally Canada, US, and Mexico. And then the A0 is the large format, which is this over here. And that is basically just printing out the full pattern. And when you're tiling your pages and you're printing any of these A4 US letters, you're basically building these pages to basically make the A0 sheet. Below it just says all of the different things, so make sure you're printing the 2 by 2 inch sort of cover page first, which normally is the front of your pattern. Down here in this little corner, you'll have a 2 by 2 inch square, and you can measure that. And when you know you've got that perfect, then you can print the rest of the pattern and everything will be to scale. And then just, you know, don't print double-sided, all of that sort of thing. Single side printing, correct paper size, so make sure you've got the right format. And if you do run into any sort of problems, then you can scan the QR code and it'll take you to the help page with a full video of how to do everything from printing the pattern to getting ready to cut out the fabric. The next page, which is really good, this is the tiling, and I just want to visually show you this. On every single pattern, you've got a little sort of map which shows you how these pages should go together. So you have your end thing. If you're obviously not tiling and you're either getting me to print the pattern and ship it to you in the studio, or you're printing out the A0 yourself, then you're not going to need all of this tiling system or all of the print settings on the page before. But if you are tiling and this is the easiest option for you, then know that, you know, the letters run horizontally and the numbers run vertically, and you'll know by looking at the map which page comes next. I've actually got some pages here that I quickly want to show you. And this is just the first 3 pages of tiling that I just want to quickly give you an example of how it works. Around all of the sort of pages, you have a bleed box, and this is the bleed line, the black line that runs all the way around. And then you have these corner bullseyes on every corner. The way that we're going to match up these pages is I'm going to get A1 and I'm going to get B1, which is the next pattern piece, and instead of butting up the pages next to each other and then just taping that, as you can see, it doesn't line everything up. So what we do with the rough cut patterns is we just overlap them. So you overlap one page directly to the bleed line, which is really nice and easy to match up, making sure that you've obviously printed this at the right scale, and then everything will line up like that. You want to get some thick tape, and then you can just, tape it down and then work your way along this sewing pattern. And as you can see, it lines up. We've added these bullseye grids to the top, just like here, and you can see that when everything lines up perfectly, these bullseye grids make a lot of sense too. Hopefully you understand the tiling. If you don't, then again, you can head over to the website, as the booklet says right here. And need more help, head to the help page, and there's a full video breakdown of how to do that. The next page is the fabric requirements for this specific project. So it says fabric width, and when you're ordering fabric, if you're getting something like selvedge denim for this tutorial, then it's most likely going to be 80 centimeters width. And then for this, you need 4.5 meters. And this is accounting the biggest size and all of the different variations of construction. So you might be able to get away with using less fabric. If you're going for 150 centimeters width fabric, then you're only going to need 2 meters of fabric, obviously, because it's wider. But you might get away with like 1.5 meters or something like that. This is just making sure that you've got enough fabric for the project, as sometimes I get messages of people that may have messed up and they haven't bought enough fabric for the project. So make sure you're always buying more than enough fabric in case you mess up on certain areas of the construction. The next page is the hardware and notions. This basically just goes through all of the zip lengths and all of the rivets, all of the sort of sizes of buttons you'll need. The page after is a little sort of checklist, and then you can tick off all of these points and it will get you ready for cutting your fabric. The page after is the QR code that goes directly to my YouTube, and you'll be able to find this video that you're watching. The next page and the final page, or there is one more page, but I'll talk about that one in a minute. This is just the customer service and help page. Preferred customer service is this top one. You can scan the QR code or take my business number, and you can WhatsApp me directly, and I will be able to send over any sort of files or any problems that you have with anything regarding the pattern. If you want help with the builds, then you can scan the Discord server or the community server on WhatsApp, and these will take you to a group of people which are admins that can potentially sort out your problem without me being there, or it's just got thousands of people in both of these communities down here, the WhatsApp and the Discord, and everyone is super nice and will be happy to help you with your builds. So yeah, that is the booklet. There is one more page I wanted to talk about. So the one last page, which I actually didn't add, and it's stupid of me not to add it, is basically the seam allowance page of what you're going to need for this whole project. We sew everything at a 1/4 seam allowance. This whole project is going to be sewn at that seam allowance. Don't add any seam allowance when cutting the fabric unless stated different. The reason it would be stated different is because you've got certain parts of the fabric like this. I can show you right here. Right here it says 1/2 inch center front seam. That means that you've got to add a 1/2 inch to one side of this whilst cutting. You don't need to do it whilst cutting out the pattern, but when you're laying this panel piece down on the fabric, you can then make sure you're cutting a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the fabric. And the reason you're doing that is because we tend to do stuff like flat fell seams and different seam types, which help give the garment more structure, like a flat fell seam, or maybe we're going to add a bigger seam allowance and then a top stitch on top. But yeah, you only need to add seam allowance to the sides which it tells you to, and don't do it on when you're cutting out the pattern, do it when you're cutting out the fabric. So here, if you can see right here, it says 1/2 inch center front seam. So the whole thing would be cut along the line up here and all the way down, but it's just when you're cutting the fabric, you're cutting the fabric directly on the line up here because it hasn't told you to do so. And then on the sort of longer edge here, you'd add a 1/2 inch center front, and that is because we'd be folding this over, but we'll get to that later. We're now at the stage where we are cutting out all of our panel pieces and cutting out all of our panel pieces out of the fabric too. So I've already cut out this pattern because I've already made this pair of 34-inch waist shorts to sort of test the pattern and everything. But this is my pattern right here. And I just wanted to say again, the really nice quality of life feature of just being able to cut out one dotted line on the pattern and then not seeing a bunch of lines next to it. I honestly think we should have integrated it a little bit earlier. It seems like an amazing quality of life feature, so I hope you guys really enjoy that. So I've already cut out every single piece, but you'd be at the stage where now you're getting a piece of your, pattern, and you're seeing this is the back piece, and you have your booklet next to you, and you're looking at the codes. This is the hammer holder, and it'd go with the back piece. And then here you've got the carpenter pocket, which will go with the back piece. You've got this alignment, but this is like an alignment pocket cutout guide, which I'll get to when we do the back pockets, but that would go with the back piece too. You've got the front pocket facing, that would go with the front piece. And then you're basically just categorizing all of your panel pieces so that you know that you can go through the process of cutting out your fabric and pretty much just making it easier for yourself. One thing that I always find with projects like this and just cutting out fabric in general is like when you lay your fabric over the whole table and just start placing panel pieces, like paper panel pieces on top of your fabric, you just don't know what things go with, and then you might lose a panel piece. It's just good to make sure that you're categorizing these panel pieces before starting, especially because this pattern is modular and there is so many pattern pieces to it. So yeah, I'm going to get to doing that and just making sure that everything's categorized, and then after that is finished we will go straight into cutting fabric. Focusing in on this page right here, which is basically categorizes all your pattern pieces. So what I'm looking at in front of me is this front system panels right here, and it will say which ones you need in the sort of coded letters and number format right there. And that is this right here. So this will have the pocket bag, the two variations of the front panel, one with a pleat at the top right here, and then one without the pleat. And then you've got all of the different variations of coin pockets. You've got the pocket bag facing, just that panel right there. And then that is everything for the front. I feel like it's really important for me to go over this again, this whole categorization of panels, just because once you have categorized everything, as you can see on the table over here, it just really makes your life easier for the rest of the tutorial, knowing what to grab at what time and what we're focusing on, because we're kind of going to do this in stages. But anyway, we've got the back pieces, the yoke pieces, the waistband, the sort of patch pocket, which will also go with the front pieces over here. And then you've got all of your back pockets, which will consist of the most small little panels. There is so many little intricate panels. That is because there is 4 variations of back pocket. I'm going to integrate the internal back pocket. I'm also going to do one of the workwear back pockets and one of the rough cut back pockets. And I won't need to show you how to do the classic back pocket, because you'll be able to understand the technique of how to do that after watching me do the other 2 pockets. I've got my fabric in front of me, and what you should do is on all of your panel pieces there should be an arrow, and that is your grain line. So you want to basically match up the sort of way your fabric moves. Certain fabric like this sort of washi fabric right here, it has a diagonal sort of grain line, which means that you want to be cutting on the sort of selvedge direction. So this will be the side of where your fabric has been weaved. You want to make sure all of the arrows are facing parallel with the side of your fabric. It just helps because certain fabrics like this have like a slight sort of stretch diagonally, and if you end up cutting one bit the other side and cutting one rotated this side and then one rotated this side, you're just going to have inconsistent panel pieces. So make sure to follow the grain line on your fabric. And then also make sure on a lot of the panel pieces it says cut to mirrored at the bottom there. For example, this pocket flap right here, you'd cut 2 of the good sides facing. So you've got good side of your fabric, good side of your fabric. They're going to be placed sandwiched together, and then you're going to cut, pin and cut, and then them 2 panel pieces are going to be sewn together, turned inside out, and that will make your sort of patch of your pocket. But it's the same sort of system, because with a pair of shorts or a pair of trousers or even a jacket or anything along the lines of that, you've obviously got one sleeve and then you've got the other sleeve too. So you're pretty much mirroring all the panel pieces, especially with the pocket bags. With pretty much most pattern pieces you're doing one side, one the other. So take care of the cut to mirrored, take into consideration the grain line, and yeah, we're gonna cut all the fabric out. So let's do it. So what is kind of annoying here is that I am slightly running out of fabric on this mud dyed stuff. It's literally the remnants of what we used for the last project. It's like a 12-month sort of process to get the fabric to where it is. It's dyed with like organic, like, you know, it's dyed by mud, so it's pretty cool in that way. But I just don't have enough of it. I did order some like selvedge denim from a place called Cloth House, if you want to check that out. It's like some really nice priced Japanese fabrics. And I also got this from there as well, but it didn't arrive in time, the selvedge denim stuff. So I'm kind of making do with what we've got in the studio here, which is a classic sort of rough cut problem to have. As I feel like every time we do these tutorials, there's always like a small little problem of something that I've forgotten, or the overlock is not working, or the iron's not working. But I think it comes with the nature of these videos. They're not meant to be the cleanest tutorials ever. They're just meant to be the best for helping you start or giving you inspiration for a project, you know? So, you've got 4 different variants of back pockets on this pair of shorts. You've got the classic back pocket, the workwear back pocket, and the rough cut back pocket. There'll be overlays of what these look like on top of the screen. And the fourth one is an internal back pocket, which you're going to use this panel right here. And the reason you're cutting this out, you don't cut this out of fabric, but it says Keystone pocket cutout guide. Cut this shape in the upper end of the back. I'm reading this backwards from the back of the paper, but essentially you're using this as a guide to lay over the back main panel. You can see that the shape will match up perfectly on top of the panel. And then you're just cutting out this guide right here. You'll then have a facing for the inside to clean up this whole sort of pocket. And then you have an inner sort of lining, which then you sew the back pocket garment to. This is the internal back pocket. I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute and sew that. But then you've got 3 different options of back pockets to choose from here. You've got the classic, the workwear, and the rough cut, as I mentioned. All of these back pockets have facings for the top hem and the side. The reason we've done it like this is because we want people to have a true shape to the final sort of like intended shape of the pocket. We don't want people to sort of like cut extra seam allowance and then have to iron in all of the curves, because for something like the rough cut pocket, as you can see, there's quite intricate curve sort of details in it. So the way we've done it is we've basically, the shape of your facing is the bottom and the side shape of your main classic pocket. And then you're basically just sewing this good sides together and then sewing it all the way around and then turning it inside out and then hitting an iron. And that will just mean that it will seamlessly close up the side and the bottom. And then you're going to do the exact same thing for the top hem and fold that in. I'll show you in the tutorial all my sewing pattern back pockets, whether it's the Keystone denim trousers, a jacket with pockets, we always have facings, as we just feel it's a really nice way of getting people to actually like accurately recreate the shapes rather than getting an iron and just ironing all the bits. Anyway, I'm going to cut these, choose the ones I want to do so you don't have to cut all of them out, but I'm going to choose one of the workwear pockets on one side, and then I'm going to choose the main internal pocket, and then I think I will do a classic back pocket actually, and then the rough cut one. You can choose this and basically follow what I'm about to do on the back pocket when I get there, and you'll know how to do the rough cut back pocket anyway. But these are what I'm going to choose. I think I'm going to do an internal back pocket on one side and then add the classic pocket below. So you've got sort of 2 pockets on the back of one side, and then the other side's going to have one really nice workwear back pocket. Yeah, I've got a few more panels to cut out of the fabric and then we'll get straight onto the sewing. So We've finished cutting out all the panels now, and one thing that's great about the pattern itself is obviously it's reusable. I just feel like I need to say this in every video. You know, selected 34-inch waist and just cut out this size. But it's reusable and you can use this forever. So, you know, you can cut out all the different sizes and print all the different sizes, and then you've got everything from a 28 waist up to 44-inch waist. So I'm gonna throw this to the side for now. And what I'm going to do is the same thing we did with our pieces of paper, just so we can keep everything under control. We've got a back panel here, and we've got a front panel, so we're just going to put all of the panel pieces that correspond and should go together. So obviously the pocket bags, the coin pockets and the facings together right here. And then for the back panel, we're just going to put all of the pockets and everything together on the back panel, and the yoke and the waistband we can just lump together with the back panel too. This little sort of fun flat pocket can go with the front, and then we can just know we're sort of looking at this in two sections. On all of my tutorials, I normally focus on the front section first. We're gonna start with the pocket bag and the coin pockets. Then we're gonna move on to the fly system. In this tutorial, I'm gonna teach you how to do a zip fly. However, if you wanted to do the one-piece fly, which I've also put in the pattern as well, I haven't cut that out here, but there's two options for you. The first option is you can watch this video right here, which will be the Keystone denim trousers, and I show you how to do a one-piece fly in that video. Alternatively, in your download pack for this sewing pattern, you should have had a POV video of me about a day ago on the pair of shorts I showed you at the beginning of the video, basically doing a one-piece fly and doing a voiceover of how to do it on that video too. In the Keystone denim trousers video, I showed you how to do it with selvedge. So the selvedge ID runs down the middle, and then on the one in the download, it shows you how to do it with non-selvedge fabric and how to fold everything and make it super clean. So if you want to do buttons for your fly, follow them two sort of pathways. But in this video, I'm going to teach you how to do a two-piece fly with a zip. But first, let's focus on the pocket bags. Right, so let me explain to you what's going on here. So I'm actually going to just do the coin pocket and the sort of pocket bag of the pair of shorts. Basically, I also wanted to explain before I do that, I've extended the bottom of this pocket bag to be a little bit longer. On the pattern piece, it should end maybe around like here, but I like deep pockets in trousers and shorts or whatever I'm wearing. I like to be able to put my phone in and keep everything kind of secure. So the pattern from here upwards stays the exact same. Don't cut this any different. But when you get down to this bottom bit, like there below, you can extend this bit to however long you want it, depending on how deep you want the pockets. Essentially, we've got this pocket facing right here. This will sit directly up the top corner. You'll have markings on the pattern, so you can actually grab some chalk and mark the sort of, you know, placement. And then we've also got a coin pocket right here. This is the carpenter one, so I'm going to integrate this into it. And then for the other side, we've got two more. We've got a pocket bag again, a facing, and then I'm going to integrate this coin pocket sitting right there. These are two different shapes. You've got one shape and another, and we're basically going to do a bunch of ironing, sewing, top stitching. You've obviously got facings for the hem, which I've already pinned to it, and I've pinned this one down here also. So with the pocket facing, this is basically going to be what you're sewing your coin pocket onto. So what we're going to start with is getting this facing out, flipping it over, and then all the way around the curved edge. We're just going to hit this with like a 1/2 inch sort of iron all the way around, just to press down this sort of edge so we can top stitch it in to the inside of our pocket. The alternate route with this is to overlock this sort of edge just so it doesn't fray, but I like to just iron it down and top stitch. Be careful you don't lose that sort of curved shape when ironing too, because that can be kind of annoying. There we have it, just like that, and then you've got your raw edge now turned into this folded edge, and then we can line it up on the top right corner of our pocket bag, top left if you're doing the other side. I can throw a few pins in that and pin it down ready to stitch all the way around. But before I do, I'm going to remove the pocket bag again, and we're going to understand how this coin pocket works. So the coin pocket shape is this, and it's going to line up right to the very edge of our pocket facing. right here. So I'm going to do the exact same and iron all this corner round and down, and then using this facing, I'm actually going to throw this together so it lines up this curve. I'm going to sew this at a really small seam allowance all the way around. I'm going to turn this whole panel inside out and top stitch it all the way around. So we're going to start with closing up this gap here and hemming this pocket, and then we're going to iron it, and then we're going to sew it to the facing, and then sew the facing to the pocket bag. So if you have watched a few of these videos, then you could probably tell something's up with my table of my sewing machine. I actually upgraded my sewing machine whilst just coming back from a trip the other day, and I've always used the Juki DDL 8700, the entry-level industrial machine, but I just recently upgraded to the DDL 7000A, and it has a motor built onto the side rather than underneath, and it pretty much just has a load of sort of like quality of life features that my other sewing machine just didn't have, like automatic thread cutting, like needle down position, and just being able to sew cleanly. I just wanted to also mention that if you have a domestic machine, you can build this complete pair of shorts on a domestic machine like this machine right here. But this one that I'm using is industrial, just follow my lead. It mainly was an upgrade because I like the quality of life features and it speeds up my production and it's great, but it's not needed, and it pretty much is the same machine as the 8700. And I also wanted to mention that it doesn't matter about your machine. If you can follow good instructions, and these tutorials will be super easy. So if you're using this coin pocket, I've basically overlapped this panel piece over the top, and we're going to focus on sewing this panel piece just like this all the way around this curve, and then I am actually going to turn it inside out, and we're going to iron this seam and then top stitch it, and that will create our hem for the inside of the coin pocket. And then, like I said, we'll iron this edge too, maybe cut off some of this excess down here, and then that will create our coin pocket, and then we can perfectly match it up to the edge of our pocket facing inside the pocket bag. You can use pins to hold this in place. I don't really feel like I need to, so I'm not, but you can. This needle down position is like such an amazing feature because it just means that I don't lose the fabric as I'm sewing, which is super nice. And then he'll click and I don't have to snip my threads. If you've watched loads of these tutorials, it's honestly, like, maybe you'll understand how much I appreciate that, but it's such a little quality of life feature because every time it's just you have to lift the foot up, pull the thread out, cut the thread, and it's just ready to go again. It's pretty nuts. I've been making stuff on this machine for a long time, the old one, so it's nice to finally upgrade. Whilst we're here, I am going to add that little sort of iron around that corner, the same as what we've done for that pocket facing right here. You can snip a little bit of this excess off because we don't need to iron it. This right here, this little sort of like right angle that I've accidentally just made, is something you want to be careful with. And as you can see, as I've sort of ironed this round in a circle, like sort of in a curve, you know, I've sort of made a mistake where it's like really straighted off the fabric here and then it's perfectly curved there. But this is the whole point of these facings. Instead of having to iron the curves round and then like messing up, you always retain your shape because you just stitch round and turn it inside out. Like, imagine how much of a nightmare it would have been for me to have to like add extra seam allowance around this sort of area and then fold in. So it kind of just means that you have that sort of clean edge without having to iron and, you know, as you go. Maybe I could have added a facing on the inside of the sort of thing, but you don't want to add too many facings because it makes it confusing for you guys. But yeah, that's kind of the point of the facings. I'll just clean that up now. And now you can use pins, but I'm just lining the sort of, you know, the top right corner of this coin pocket up to the top right corner of the pocket facing. And then you can see the fold is already made down the bottom here. What I'm going to do is just pin the other side in place too. just like this, just to keep it all in place. And then I'm going to do a really close seam allowance all the way along this sort of raw edge, because we don't want it to show in our final garment. We just want to hide that stitch so it sort of, you know, stitches this top panel to the facing, but we don't want it to show in the final garment. So really close seam allowance stitch along the edge, and then we're going to do a normal 1/4 all the way around this. But obviously we're not stitching along what we've already stitched up here, because that's the opening of the pocket. Now I have sewn that coin pocket into the pocket facing, we can now introduce it back to the pocket bag. This panel, it looks like this, and we're going to connect it right up to the top right, just like we did before. And then I'm going to throw a pin in this just to be able to hold it in place. And the same maybe with down here on the curve, just throw a little pin in here just to hold it, and then the same just right up here somewhere. I'm putting the ball sort of point of my pin inwards a little bit so it doesn't sort of stop me from sewing. And then this is what I mentioned about the small seam allowance all the way around here, all the way around. We're just keeping that sort of consistent and doing the exact same small seam allowance when we get to these raw edges. And then when we aren't on these raw edges and we're actually sewing the pocket facing down, we can carry on that 1/4 as it just keeps everything looking clean. So we're focusing in on these two panels right here. We've got the pocket bag with the sort of coin pocket that we've just integrated inside of it, and we have the wearer's left of the front panel right here. So this is the wearer's left pocket and this is the wearer's front. We've got the pleated front, so I'm going to add the pleat in a minute. However, when you turn this pocket over and put it front facing, you'll see that that curve perfectly lines up from the very top all the way down. Now we're going to sew a 1/4 stitch all the way through this pocket, and if you've watched any of my tutorials before, you'll know how to integrate a pocket bag, but if not, then stay tuned. Basically what this is going to do is half of this is going to fold over, and you'll see that that sort of shape all the way down this pocket bag is really flush and matches up perfectly just like that. And then that will integrate into this. And then as you can see, that is how the pocket will look, which is super, super nice. So how are we going to do this? We're basically going to put the front facing, so the good side of the pocket bag, against the good side of the outside of the front panel. You can throw a few pins in this, but I don't feel like I really need to. I'm going to run a 1/4 round, and then I'm going to turn it inside out, hit it with an iron, and then we're going to top stitch down that. And then the pocket bag will be integrated inside. We'll close up the pocket bag. I'll show you some ways of doing that, and then we will basically off camera, I'll get on doing exactly the same process as what I've done to this pocket bag and the front panel, just the other side of the pair of shorts, and then we'll get on to doing the fly. So let me bring you over to the machine. So again, you want to line up these sort of right angles right here, the top of the pocket bag, good sides facing together. And then we're going to just stitch all the way around at a 1/4, which is this line right here. I always reference a 1/4 on my patterns. It just makes it easy for people who have domestic machines, and it just feels comfortable for us to sew. So back and forth tack when you start stitching, just to add a bit more reinforcement to the thing you are stitching at the top. And we're going to run that all the way around. And this should, as you can see now, match up perfectly to the edge of that right angle, and then you can carry on stitching all the way through. Cut the excess threads, and now we can turn this inside out and iron down the sort of pocket opening hem. So now you've got your pocket bag right here on the inside of your garment, you can add this top stitch all the way around, which will close up the hem of your main front pocket of the shorts. But before you do that, you want to close up this pocket bag, and there's a few ways of doing this. You can either fold this over and overlock this all the way round with an overlocker. My overlocker's broken, so I can't do that. Or you can fold these in just like this and then stitch it round. But an easier way of doing this, just to make it make sense for you, is let's quickly hem the top of the pocket and then I'll show you a different technique. Just like that, and then we've hemmed all of the top of the pocket. And now what you can do here, which is quite an interesting sort of thing, is we know we're trying to close up this pocket bag this way, and we know we need to tuck these sort of edges in so we don't have loose edges, so the pocket bag lasts for a long time. The way we're going to do this is we're actually going to flip it the other way, so just closing up just like this, making sure it matches up, and then we're going to run a stitch all the way around, and when we turn this inside out, it will just make it have a clean sort of stitch. So we're sewing this with the bad sides of the pocket bag together, and I'm just going to stitch all the way around. When you turn that inside out, you can see that it's now perfectly closed up that whole pocket bag there. And now we can just hit an iron all along this. And then now you can line it up on the other side. So you can see we need to pull this over a slight bit, and then you can throw a little pin in here to make sure that this part right here, which is now open, is closed up with a pin, and the same with the top. One up there, one just down here. And then we're just going to do a little bar tack stitch on this edge and on this edge right here. And that will close up our pocket bag. And as you can see on the inside, it's super clean. If you wanted to, you could run a top stitch around this too. I don't really feel like that's necessary, but you can do that. Just a back and forth stitch. That is your complete pocket bag fully functioning, which I'm really happy with. I think that looks really nice with the washi fabric and the mud dyed fabric sort of next to each other. So I've brought back the paper part of the pattern, and that is because right here you'll see that there's join these points. This right here is the pleat, these sort of lines right here. So you're joining your pleat. You're joining your pleat to where this black line is right here, and you're doing it through these lines right here. So what you want to do is you want to get your chalk and mark where the pleats are. You can just line up right there. So we're joining to around this point, doing it from this point. So I've marked my pleat, and it doesn't need to be too crazy, but we're just joining up that white line to the other side right there. And then we're going to throw a little pin into this pleat right there. And if you chose to not do the pleat on the front, you'd use the classic without the pleat. However, I think the pleat is going to look super clean in this right here. So you can just do a little bar tack on the top of here to keep it sort of in place. So that is the whole front panel fully completed now. You can choose to add that little patch pocket that we put an indication look on the pattern. It says small patch pocket placement. That is the one with the flap and the little sort of small pocket right there. But you can choose not to add that. I think I'm going to put it somewhere else on the pattern a bit later on. But that would, you know, you'd copy the marking over and then you'd place that patch pocket in here. But I'm going to show you how to do that later. But this is the whole front panel completed. I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side, but the only difference is I'm using a different coin pocket, but it's the exact same procedure as what I just showed you with hemming the top, sewing the facing, you know, doing all the ironing, but I'm just going to do it on this pocket bag right here. And this is the carpenter style coin pocket that I'm doing. So I just finished the other side of the pocket and the pleat for the other wearer's right off camera. I filmed some of it on the iPhone, but I really like how it looks now. Both pockets, this sort of beige with this deep brown, it works super nice. And I actually added some little stitch details onto this, where whilst I was sewing like the coin pocket, I did a little sort of fishtail sort of design, and then this sort of one that came out like this. It's obviously optional, and the plan was to make this out of salvage denim and use like a opposing color, like a yellow or an orange, and then them stitch details all over the garment, so it sort of, you know, made up this amazing sort of really detailed garment throughout. But I'm kind of doing it in this sort of style of the brown, and to be honest, it's sort of taking place to look kind of like Western in a way, which is super nice, sort of like a, you know, like a cowboy's pair of shorts, especially with that fishtail at the end. So yeah, what I'm going to focus on now is I'm going to grab these two panels. This is your sort of J-stitch, cover stitch, fly facing, and then this is your fly shield. This one we're going to fold over in half, and it's going to act as the shield behind your zipper when you undo your fly. And this one is going to go right down here. It will be your clean J-stitch on the inside, just like this. So as I mentioned, I'm showing you how to do a two-piece fly, but there is a tutorial for the single-piece fly with the buttons. You can find that in the description below. It will link you to the Keystone Denims video, or you can go and find the download for this pattern and then use the iPhone voiceover tutorial that comes with it. So let me show you how to do a fly. Basically what I'm doing now is I don't have a 7.5 inch closed end metal zipper, which you should have, and I'm actually recycling one off an old pair of Dickies trousers, and I'm putting it in the garment. So I'm just getting a blade. I don't actually like using a seam ripper. I never have, I never will. I usually just use a blade until that happens, and then you cut into the zipper. So maybe use a seam ripper, but yeah, I don't usually do it. So we're focusing in on these panels right here, specifically this area, the front rise it's called, and the front rise on the other side. We've got, as I said, our fly facing and our fly shield, and then I've just recycled that 7.5 inch zipper from a pair of Dickies trousers, and you can see that it fits perfectly, and it will fit perfectly inside this little fly system. So how are we going to do this? First off, if you have it, overlock around this edge, this curved edge, because it will clean it up and mean it won't fray. My overlockers broke, as I always mention in these videos, so I'm not going to do that. And then with this one right here, what we are going to do is I'm just going to snip up directly in the middle. So let's fold it in half so we can get the middle perfectly. Just run a little. Then we get the middle, and I'm going to snip up like about 1.5 inches, just like this. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold that in about there. It will mean that we can fold in about there, and we're basically just going to do a little triangle on both sides, just like this. So you should have something looking like this on the inside, and then on the outside you've just folded in these bottom pieces right here. Then I'm actually going to fold it in half, line them folds up that we've just made right there, so it should look something like this. And then we're going to run an iron all the way up. And then again, you can then overlock this side and then stitch a short seam allowance all the way around this. And then, yeah, so to explain that again, we've basically just folded this square zipper shield in half, got the marking about 1.5 inches up, cut into the center, folded the two triangles out, and then folded it again in half. Then you want to overlock down this, and then we're going to run some stitches across this short seam allowance just to close up this zipper shield. This zipper shield will sit right here. This zip will sit right there. This cover will sit basically like there, and then this on top like that. So then when you open this, you'll see the zipper, and then the zipper shield will cover it. So then obviously you can open your zip when you need to use it. But how are we going to sew all this together? I'm basically going to break this down so it's so simple for you not to get wrong. And yeah, before I do any of that, overlock around this corner. If you don't have an overlocker, you can leave it fresh and just, you know, loose edge. And then overlock down this, or if you don't have an overlocker, just stitch all the way around it like I'm going to do. And then leave this one, stitch around this one, and then we'll get back to where we were. There's a little bit of excess right here which we can just snip off, it won't make any difference. And then again, overlock down this side if you have the overlocker. So you should have something looking perfectly like this. So what we need to understand here is we need to manipulate all of these panel pieces, these two, and against, you know, the front rise, so that this zipper obviously, like I said, sits in this one, and then it obviously sits underneath this one right here. And then obviously that will sit on top, and then that will get integrated under the wearer's right. So the way we're gonna do this is we've just lined up our zip to the end, front facing, by just my little example there. You basically want your zipper to sit under this and attached to this cover. So when this facing is attached to the pair of shorts, the zipper will attach to the facing, and then the facing will attach to the shorts, and then the J stitch that we do round, that decorative stitch, is what's going to attach the cover, the facing, to the inside of this wearer's left. I can flip this over and show you here. We want to basically sew this zipper front facing down to the cover, and we want to do it and maybe leave a little few millimeters, 2 millimeters from the very edge, and we're doing this on the right angle sort of straight side, not the curved sort of J side. What we're going to do is we're going to get a zipper foot on our sewing machine, and we're going to stitch all the way down the inside tape of this zipper, not the outside, because you'll cover the zip and we won't be able to open it. We want to stitch down the inside tape with a zipper foot. And you can lift up the sewing foot and pull your zip puller through just to make it easier for you to stitch. And as you can notice here, when I'm stitching this, I'm perfectly lining up the zipper tape so it's flush with the end, which means you have a little gap here, and this little gap will be where your waistband will be attached. So we don't want any metal teeth running all the way to the top, otherwise you'll break a needle when you go to input the waistband. All the way up, and now the zipper is integrated into the facing, just like this. And now we want to integrate the facing to the wearer's left. And we can move the other panels out the way right now just to make it less confusing to you. So what you're going to do is you're just going to pull the zipper back and you're going to pin it in place, so we're not sewing the zipper down when we sew it. And we're basically going to get the front facing of this, so the front facing good sides, and we're going to place it down just perfectly, lining it up all the way down the pair of shorts' front rise on the left, just like this. And then just like that, we're going to stitch a 1/4 seam allowance all the way up, and then turn it inside out, and then we're going to cut a little notch down the bottom here, so I'll show you. So basically, let me just quickly demonstrate what's going on again here. The front facing of the zip, so the good side of the zip with the puller on, is facing the good side of the sort of facing, fly facing. This is going to integrate onto the inside, just like that, and we don't want to sew down this tape because that tape is going to be what connects to the other side, sort of zipper shield and the wearer's right. So again, we want the zip to be out the way because we're attaching the facing to the shorts, and we're going to sew a 1/4 all the way up here. So 1/4 stitch. Now we can bring this back over to the table, and what we're going to do is keep that pin in the zip now, and we can actually fold this round and iron, making sure it's flush. Zip cover on the inside, just like this. And you can see that we've created a little fold here that we don't want. So if I turn this over, and you can see it from the inside, we can see we've got this annoying little fold. So this fold, we just want to line it up on the outside before we do the iron again, and we're just going to snip a little notch right below, like right below where we have just stitched the 1/4 seam allowance on the bottom of the facing. You can take that pin out just to make sure it's easier for you right here. We're going to iron that back in, just like that. And you can see that we have a bit of raw edge right here. This is where we're going to do our flat fell seam in a minute, just to make sure that we've got structure to the front rise. We're just going to add a 1/4 top stitch just on that fold that we've just ironed out. Now we want to bring it back to the table, and we know that the zipper shield is going to sit under the zipper. So we can now either do the J stitch or we can attach the zipper shield, but we don't want to attach the zipper shield yet. We want to actually make our J stitch right here so it lines up perfectly. The way I'm going to do this is I am going to turn the whole pair of shorts over, and we know that we're going to stitch all across this. I wouldn't normally recommend sewing on the inside of the garment facing down on your sewing machine, just because if you have the tension slightly wrong, then your bottom sort of bobbin thread is not going to be clean at all. But this is a really new machine for me, and I know I've set up the thread correctly. So I'm actually going to sew on the inside, right on the edge. You can tell now that if you were to overlock the inside sort of, you know, this curve J part, then it would clean it up so you wouldn't have any sort of loose frays on the inside here. However, I'm just going to run a little stitch anyway all the way around, and then I'm going to turn it over and add another decorative stitch to match it. So yeah, let's do that now. So now we have one of our decorative stitches in here. I think what I'm going to do, because we've got quite a lot of space here to sew on, and it doesn't really matter because we've already closed up that sort of facing cover to the inside of our where is left. I'm going to play around with another decorative stitch, as long as you're not sewing on the zipper, because the zipper needs to be left open like this so we can connect it to the other side. But you can play around with some decorative stitches. Something like that. So we just don't want to stitch this part of the zipper tape down. Like I mentioned, it's super important for connecting to the other side of the wearer's right. But I'm going to do that decorative stitch now. I just ironed the pleat down here, and look at that decorative stitch right there. I kind of just freestyled something random, but I think it looks really, really nice. I'm gonna do a little decorative stitch on the pocket here, and then I think I'm gonna try and find like a little label to come out right there. I think that's quite nice, like a little sort of, some kind of like equivalent to the Levi's label coming out the pocket. I think that'd be nice, but I'm not too sure what that would be yet, so I'll have a little look. I'm getting carried away over here with some of these decorative stitches. It's so hot, and I'm so hot, but pretty much I've just put some decorative stitches on this coin pocket and realized that I've completely closed the pocket shut, which is a very amateur thing for me to show you and just do in general. I didn't even know. Max behind the camera was like, does that not just sew the pocket shut? And I was like, hold on a minute. And it does. But I actually might keep this one as like a decorative pocket because I'm not removing the stitches because now the holes are put in the fabric. But the decorative stitches are done. Let me show you how to do the rest of the fly. So now what we know is when we open this up, we can see that we haven't sewn any of this zip tape on the left for us right now. So we can actually slide that zipper shield underneath, and we can like match it up at the very top to make sure it's the same. We can pull this zipper down all the way, and we can line this up right on the edge. And then we're going to stitch all the way down this, lining this zipper tape up to the flush edge of the zipper shield. And then we can sew that in. You would want to use a zipper foot on your machine, but I'm just doing it without that because why not? So again, just lining up that zipper. And again, when you start getting near the top, you can sort of lift the foot up, move the puller through, and then it gives you enough space to be able to keep the stitch going. And now that is the zipper shield fully integrated in right there, which looks super nice. So now we have the zipper sewn in to the zipper shield on the back. It looks really clean like that. Imagine if this was overlocked and that was overlocked, it'd look really nice. But yeah, we're going to grab the other front panel and we're going to do the front facing, so good sides facing each other, and we're just going to sew the front panel lining up that right angle at the top so it's all the same height again, and I'm just going to stitch the front panel to the good side of the zipper tape and nothing else, just the zipper tape. So you have your front panel, your wearer's right, you have the zipper sandwiched in the middle, and then your zipper shield below. So try to move all the other bits out the way. If you want to move everything else out the way, you can literally just pull that back and throw a pin in there just to hold it in place so you know you're not going to sew over it. And then again, front facing, sew all the way up, making sure that it aligns perfectly at the top, just like that. Then as you can see, everything now is together. Okay, let's run a top stitch just all the way down what we've just sewn right there. So we can line it up again. And again, you're going to have to cut a little notch in this, the same as what we did before. But you can just run that top stitch right down to the bottom of the shield. And then we can pull it back over to the table and take that pin out. Right now we can see that naturally this sort of fold that we've made, everything's naturally going to come over from where it's left to right. So we want to do our flat fell seam so it folds over from where is left to right. And if I can visually show you, it should look something along the lines of this right here. We don't want to be folding the other direction for this bottom rise because it just will make everything sort of bunch up in the middle here. So your fold of this two bottom sort of pieces is going to follow the direction of your fold all the way up the fly, just like this. So how are we going to do that? Basically, we can flip it over and we can basically get the wearers right, and we're basically going to stitch it a few millimeters, as you can see there from the top. So bad sides together, we're going to stitch that very close seam allowance towards the edge of the lower piece of fabric and just stitch a line all the way along. And then we're going to fold and do a flat fell seam. If you're interested in flat fell seams, I do have tutorials on my other videos, but I'm going to show you how to do it here anyway. So yeah, let me just stitch this. But remember, a few millimeters, we're going to stitch the wearer's right, which sits a little bit lower because the fold goes from the wearer's left over the wearer's right to keep the consistency of our fly fold. So as you go along here, as I said, we're stitching as close as we can to the edge of that bottom fabric. You can see you can kind of line it up as you go whilst this few millimeters right here. And again, close as you can, all the way along, back and forth tack. And then naturally, we should be able to then be able to fold over this fabric, hide the stitch we just made. This is the underneath of the stitch we just made. And then this is what we just did. We should be able to fold that over and sort of create this kind of, I guess you could call it a little mini flat fell on the rise. So this piece of fabric's folding through and the loose edge is being caught underneath, and the same with the under one, but they're just basically going like this, if that makes sense. They're just, all the sort of frayed edges are coming and sort of wrapping themselves in. So now we can like manually fold this and make sure that that stitch is out the way. And then we can throw a pin just in here like that. And we're pinning from the bottom with the sort of pins facing downwards because we're going to be sewing up this rise. And now we just want to make sure when we start this stitch, both pieces of fabric are as straight as they can be. If you stitch it and there's like a little angle here, it's going to affect the final fit of your shorts. So there needs to be a complete straight line here on your flat fell. And I'm going to stitch right as close to the edge of that fold as I can. Remember, the more neatly you pin this, you can kind of maneuver it as you go, but the more neatly you pin this, the better the final stitch and garment is going to be, because we want to hide this stitch that I'm kind of not hiding at the moment, but I can manually sort of fold this as I go and get it under there a little bit better. You can also get some tweezers on this too. Tweezers and things like that get quite handy when you're sewing intricate parts. And then basically the top stitch we made earlier, we can match this stitch that we are making now up to the top stitch we made earlier. And then I'm going to throw another stitch in there just for extra support. little back and forth stitch, pull it up, and then we will do another stitch next to it, just really close. On the inside, you can see that we've closed up that flat fell, so there's no raw edge on the inside, and on the outside, we've done the exact same thing right there. And now that is your fly. Just sort out the pleats, take this pin out, and that is your fly right there. So I've now just fully finished the whole front panels. I've added the pockets, the zip two-piece fly. Obviously, if you wanted to do the one-piece fly, you can follow the other tutorials. But I just realized, and it's kind of stupid of me, that I didn't integrate the fireman part of the fly. And I should have told you to do it earlier. I'm actually going to put a little timestamp at that part of the video. You might have already seen it. To jump to here, you're basically stitching this in as well. And this is just a little cover that will sit in here. And then we'll put some buttons on here. It extends the waistband, and it's like a really sort of fun kind of fly cover that gives it a little bit more structure. It's like a fireman sort of integration. Anyway, what we're gonna do is we're going to grab a blade, unfortunately, and we are going to undo this stitch all the way up. This is the stitch that basically connects the fly facing to the wearer's left. And take this really slow because we don't want to cut anything now. And then you can just take all the stitches out and throw them to the side. To be honest, it might be a good time to actually integrate this too, because, you know, once you're doing it at the beginning, it might be kind of annoying to make the whole fly with this integrated. So I'm not even unhappy about doing it this late into the process. So once we got this open, we can just remove any excess thread, and then we can sort of move that to the side. And then we want to look at this fireman cover. What we're going to do is we're going to do a quite deep seam allowance stitch all the way around. So I'm going to start at maybe like this corner or close to this corner down here, stitch all the way up, and then turn this inside out, top stitch it, and leave the other longer and smaller edges completely raw, and we're going to stitch them up. That is because the waistband will attach to the top, and then the sort of side will get integrated into the in between this part right here. So yeah, make sure you're removing all the threads. We're going to try and do the stitch so it looks like we haven't actually undone the stitch. It should just be able to go in the same sort of stitch holes we've made. As you know, I just opened this up right here. The zip's fine, everything's fine on the fly, but we've just undone this stitch right here. We're gonna slot in the fireman zip cover right there, and then we're gonna pin it down in between, and then sew it in. But as we do, we can see that we've got this front closure flap right here, and this is where we can do our markings for our buttons. So we can pull this out quickly and do our markings for our buttons. So let's say that we need one right here, one right here, and then one right there. You can do that a little bit more precise than I did. But we now put buttonholes on this. You either have a buttonhole maker on your domestic, or you could do it in another way. I like to just do a back and forth tack on the industrial machine and just get them buttonholes in there and then put some buttons over. So I'm actually going to do that now. I'm just going to do the buttonholes where I've marked, reference the button size so you don't make it too small or too big, and then we'll integrate it in and I'll just stitch it back in. This is basically going to run down and extend our waistband, as you can see, and then yeah, everything should be good. I should have done this earlier, but I'm not mad that we're doing it at this point either. I'm deciding on what buttons to choose for the fireman cover. I think I'm going to go for this one. Slotted the fireman cover into the actual top of the fly, and I'm just pinning it in place. You can make sure as you go through it lines up, because you want your pins to run through, and then, you know, make sure it's going through the back fabric too. These are my really makeshift buttonholes, but once the button's integrated, it looks kind of cool anyway. So I like how DIY it looks in that sense. And then what you can do is open the zipper of your fly, just like this, to give us a bit more space. And then we're just going to stitch all the way up where them pins are. Just like that, and now we've integrated the fireman and everything's back to normal. And then what we can do is we can close that zip up, and we can actually just run a little deeper stitch from the rise that we did the flat fell on into the actual fly, just because I want to make sure that it's closed all the way up to the bottom of where the zip is in here. We can sort of just keep running that stitch up, but just make sure you don't sew over the bottom of the zipper. Just make sure you know that you're sewing to the side. So now what we can do, I'll show you from the right way up, is we can see that everything matches perfectly now. The fly opens, it's got the fireman extension on. We can open the zipper, it functions perfectly, and we've just done a little reinforcement stitch that goes up a little bit further to the bottom of the zip. So we can close up at the zip and line everything up, and we're just going to mark where our buttonholes are going to go by just putting a little mark through the buttonholes. And then we can grab a hammer, and I can put these sort of button studs in. So I can just kind of push this through at the perfect point. Just right there. Just like that. Oh my God, I literally can't tell you how hot it is up here. It's like a sauna, and it is incredibly hot. I've just been told that it's like the hottest day in June ever since like 1970. It's like 36 plus degrees, which is a lot for the UK. Anyway, we've just finished the whole front panel, and it is looking a bit lederhosen, like kind of German, like Oktoberfest, leprechaun, dancing around serving beer. So we're basically at a point where we're going to focus in on the back panel now. It's kind of hard to concentrate with the heat, but we're getting there, which are these two pieces right here. But I'm going to construct the yoke first. So there's a few panels, and I'm going to just sort of break it down to you from a top view of what's going on. But make sure you have your classic yoke panel, because it's important for the actual shape and size if you're building the buckle back yoke. So we're basically breaking this down into two sections. On one side, you've got the sort of buckle integration to the yoke, and we can place that on top right here to the bottom, and then we can actually place the classic yoke on top and check the sizing, and that looks about perfect. And that's what the classic yoke is for. We're just using it to line up, because you don't want to sort of move this too far in and then your yoke will be too small, or you don't want to move it too far out and your yoke will be too big. You can kind of line it up to the very bottom here and also the top. So this sort of integrated buckle back system is something that me and Gio came up with, and it basically creates the buckle integrated into the back yoke rather than just sewing the buckle onto the back yoke. And it's really nice because when it's sewn down, it kind of lifts up and the waistband connects all the way along the top. Obviously we flat fell seam down here, and it really makes this nice sort of curved yoke, and then this buckle works. And the way we're pretty much going to do this is obviously, you know, check one side, and this right here would act as the inside facing. So that would obviously go on the other side, sewn together front facing, turned inside out, and then that would be what the buckle would be on this. So it would basically be these three components, which I'll show you how to sew to make this side of the yoke, move them out the way, and then these three panels right here would be the exact same process. So sew together front facing, turn inside out, and then you're connecting these two to this right here. And then obviously you can add your hardware when you've put it together. But essentially this is what it's going to look like, something similar to this right here. And then that's your buckle, and then this is your sort of curved yoke right here. Anyway, let's get to stitching it. So we want to focus in on this panel first, and then put the facing on top, just like this. And then we're going to stitch all the way around with a really close seam allowance and then turn inside out and do the exact same thing for the other wearer's right. So just connecting up these triangles at the end and then sewing this really close seam allowance, turn inside out, iron, press, top stitch, and then we can connect them to these two panels right here. So I'm going to start my stitch from inside, like my sort of, you know, the needle is inside my fabric. We're not going to sort of stitch onto the fabric. It basically, we want to start from where on the inside fabric, so this mud dyed fabric, it's got like a little dip, so it goes up. Let me show you and take it out of the fabric. We're starting to stitch along this sort of point here. I kind of misaligned it there, but I was just showing you. Connect that up. I'm going to start from right on that point, dropping the pin in. You will have that point too, you can mark it on your pattern. And then we're going to stitch really close seam allowance, a little back and forth tack just to keep it in place, really close seam allowance all the way around. Just like that. Now we can turn this inside out. This can be a bit fiddly. You can kind of push it through from the inside. Just like that. Turned inside out, and now we're going to press it and then run a top stitch just all the way around where that buckle would be. This is the smaller side of the buckle, so this is actually going to be folded over with the sort of metal hardware and integrate. The other side is obviously longer, so that's going to be what's going to run through the hardware. Now you can see, because we started on that point and then I started in the fabric, it means that we can actually turn this, when we turn it inside out and press it with the iron, it should now line up perfectly to the bottom and the top of that yoke, just like that. And then we should be able to put the classic yoke panel on top, and it should be perfect. And obviously it says 1/2 inch yoke seam allowance, which we've got running all the way down. So yeah, what we're going to do now is we're going to run a top stitch just on the actual yoke all the way around. You can add some decorative stitches or whatever you like, and then we will integrate it into the yoke system, the bottom panel. And the way we're going to sew this is we are literally going to do a straight line all the way down, connecting both these panels. And it should just give you a little bit of a decorative stitch too. People won't really notice, obviously they will because we've got different colour, but if you were using all denim it would look really clean. So I'm just following this all the way through so it matches up perfectly. Just like that. And there we have one of the sides of the yoke with the integrated buckle. And we're going to do the exact same process for the other side. So what we just focused on was this right here. We just finished the yoke. This left side, so the wearer's left, would be the piece that connects the hardware to the actual buckle. So you'd thread that through and you'd actually sew that right there onto the buckle just to keep the buckle in place. And then this wearer's right would come up and then through, and then it would be the piece that you tighten. But we don't need to focus on that at the moment. We can kind of move our piece of hardware away. So I want to put an internal pocket on the back. I also want to do one of the classic pockets, and I want to do one of the workwear pockets. I've got the carpenter hammer holder, and then I've got this sort of patch pocket. I've got the waistband, and then I've also got the two back pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect the yoke that we've got over here, which I just showed you, to the back pieces, and then we're going to connect the back pieces together. And before I connect the two sort of mirrored sides of the back pieces together, I'll probably construct all the pockets, put the hammer holder on, and then after we'll put the front to the back and then connect the waistband. So I'll show you how to do this really cool sort of internal pocket. Okay, so this right here is the panel that we're going to need if we are integrating our internal pockets into the back of the main panel that connect up to the bottom of the yoke. As you can see on the wearer's left, we didn't integrate that pocket, but it would sit somewhere just like right here, integrated into the yoke. And I'm going to show you how to build that now. essentially, this panel right here is a guide. So you'd lay it right over the top of your back panel, as you can see, and you'd use this as a guide to draw where you would cut out the fabric. And then we can introduce these two panels. This right here is the facing for that. So once you've cut that guide out, you'd use this as the facing to sew on. And then below that, you would sew this panel piece right here as the internal pocket bag. So you'd sort of see the stitches on the outside of your pocket bag on the garment, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But what I'm going to do first, before I actually fully integrate the pocket bag, is that I'm actually going to sew a pocket to the outside of the garment so that I'm not doing it when the pocket bag is actually sewn. If I basically build this internal pocket and then sew the pocket bag to it, then it will make it like near impossible, and I'll end up doing what I did earlier where I sew the pocket shut. So I'm going to focus on using this classic pocket, basically getting this internal pocket so that it's ready for me to integrate the pocket bag, but I'm not going to integrate the pocket bag yet. I'll do the outline, do the facing, so I have everything sort of lined up and I know where I can place this main classic pocket below, and then after it's sewn, then I will integrate the back pocket. So you can use this guide right here to draw the pocket on, but I'm actually just going to use the facing to draw around, just so it's more accurate when we sew the facing. So I'm going to just draw around the facing, and then we're going to cut this out. Now we know that this facing is going to fit perfectly right on there, just like that. And then we can add a pin to the facing, just to keep it in place. We're going to sew around it and then do what we've been doing the whole tutorial, turning it inside out, top stitching, and that's going to give us our opening of the pocket. So what we would do now, as you can see, I've just sewn that front facing good sides together and then ironed it, and that is our facing for our internal pocket. And as you can see, once we place this under, I just put a little pin in there to show the good side whilst I was cutting the fabric. You can see that when it's lined up perfectly, you can see that that right there is your internal pocket. And then that basically just connects everything up, so then we can bring the yoke back and sew it on. However, obviously if we sew round this pocket bag, it will close this pocket, and then we'd probably bar tack these top corners to keep it in place. But if we do that first, it will mean that when I then go to sew this pocket in place, it will mean that I won't be able to open this pocket because it will just, you know, get in the way. So I think the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to place it directly below, just like this, and then when I do sew this pocket down, it will still mean that you can open that one. I kind of want to make sure that I'm sewing this stitch all the way around first, even though I said it might not be a good idea to do it. The reason I am going to is because I know that this, now I'm looking at it, this classic pocket is a little bit wider than the stitch of the internal pocket bag. So I'm going to stitch the internal pocket bag in place, and then I'm going to build this classic pocket to put it right underneath. And then what I'm going to do is, if you remember this flap pocket that we had, I'm actually going to integrate this flap pocket just to sit right below this classic pocket, and I think it will look quite nice. And then finally to this side, I'm actually going to grab our little hammer sort of holder, that carpenter thing, and I'm going to connect that up to the side classic pocket right there. So it'll be like a mixture of back pockets here on the back of this sort of wearer's right. So what I want to do is I'm going to move all the panels out the way and just focus in on this right now. If I flip this over, you'll be able to see where the pocket bag's going to sit. We want to keep it quite level and make sure it has enough distance both sides, just so it sits nice and perfect. And then I'm actually just going to throw a little pin, I'll just use the one that I had earlier, just in here to mark it. And then I wouldn't normally recommend doing this, but because it would be near impossible to sew from the other side and be able to know where this marking is, you either want to sew from the inside, just make sure your tension's perfect so the bottom bobbin thread isn't just rubbish on the main good side of your fabric. Or alternatively, the other way to do it would be to flip it over and grab your chalk pen and just mark along the edge of that pocket, so you know that you can run your stitch. You can kind of feel it out and know where it sits. And I can iron this off in a second, but it just means that now if I keep my stitch on the left side, if I'm looking at it directly on, and we stitch on the inside of that line, we know it will line up with the pocket bag. I want to reiterate this just one more time. So basically with this internal pocket, its kind of functionality is meant to be used separately from any of the external pockets. So, you know, the modularity to it would be you could choose the internal pocket or you could choose the external pockets. Obviously for this tutorial, I want to show you how to do both. So I'm showing you how to do the internal stuff, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend to just overlay a pocket over the pocket bag, because as you can see, when I go to stitch this classic pocket on top, it is going to be on top of the stitch mark that I'm about to make. So I might offset it a little bit just so you get the stitch mark into the pocket. It's kind of just decorative what I'm doing. I would probably recommend either choosing the classic pocket or choosing, you know, the rough cut pocket or the workwear pocket, or just go for the internal one. But yeah, I just like to sort of flow the creative brain and do random stuff, but it's going to look quite decorative. It probably won't be too functional, that internal pocket, because we are sewing over it. And with these bar tacks, I'm doing them really close to the edge of the seam allowance, as you can see right here. Really close, because we're going to cover that up with the flat fell seam. So that right there is your internal pocket finished. But as I mentioned, I'm going to pretty much just cover a bit of this pocket. It will still be functional to the side, but as I said, I'm just going to place this sort of classic pocket slightly under. And then when I do this stitch all the way down, it will kind of like go over the top. But I guess a way you could kind of get past that is by unstitching the side of this pocket bag down to the very bottom, folding it under, stitching this bit back, and then carrying it on through and then restitching this after. I might end up doing that in a second. So to be able to make this classic pocket, I'll show you right now, it's the same thing as what we've been doing the whole tutorial, is putting the facing on top, making sure that that sort of diagonal bit is matched up with the other diagonal bit right there. And we're going to sew the facings on, the side facings and the top facing. I'll start with the top facing. So you want to grab the correct top facing, which is this one right here. And we're going to run a stitch all the way across this and then down, and then we're going to turn it inside out, press it, and then hem it. When you're turning this inside out, just make sure that you're trimming the corners, because it will make your turning inside out way easier to do. So I think what I'm going to be able to do here is, if I now remove some of this stitching all the way down, I can actually move the internal pocket bag out the way, start this stitch on the main front pocket, and then I can sort of put that pocket bag back, do the stitch all the way down again, and then the rest of this pocket doesn't interfere with the internal pocket bag at all, so I'll be able to just stitch around the rest of this completely fine. So yeah, I guess I didn't really know the sort of positioning of this internal pocket bag stitching before I stitched it in. So you could just make sure that you line it up, draw with the chalk and the wax pen before you do this internal pocket bag stitch, and then sew the front pocket bag on first, but only down to a certain point. Stitch the internal pocket bag on and then carry on your stitch. Obviously, if you were to stitch this classic pocket onto the garment before doing the internal pocket bag, then you wouldn't be able to do this stitch all the way around. So yeah, I'm basically just going to undo this, stitch from the top right of the classic pocket down, and then we're going to put it back, stitch it up, or we can just carry on our stitch and stitch it up afterwards. I don't think I need to open it too much either. I can literally just run a little blade open as long as it opens this sort of area up, and it should allow me to pull it to the side enough so I can start the stitch. So when I'm pinning this classic pocket bag in place, I want to make sure that them pins aren't running through both pieces of fabric. So let's say I want it right there. I'm going to just get the pin and I'm going to run it through just the first layer of fabric, not the internal pocket bag, just this first layer with the pin. And then we're going to do another one with the pin just a bit further down, and then we can actually just pin it on the side here into place. And it doesn't matter whether you go over both, because we know we're stitching a little bit further than that internal stitch line. And now when we go to sew this, as I mentioned, we're going to actually move this pocket bag out the way, so we could just pull a bit more stitches out of here. And then we're going to sew this classic pocket, moving that pocket bag out of the way so the stitch lines up with the bottom of these sort of pins, and then we can carry on round the pocket and then sew from the side of the pocket to close up that pocket bag again. You also just want to make sure where that stitch stops that we've just unpinned for the pocket, sort of internal pocket bag, we want to run that stitch all the way to the very edge of the pocket, because when we go to re-put that stitch back in, we want it to match up, otherwise there'll be a hole in our internal pocket bag. So let's carry through where we were, so let's say like there. And you can see I'm right on that edge of that sort of classic pocket. Back and forth tack just to close it up. And then now we can move out the way the pocket bag, start the stitch right where we need it. We can stitch all the way down, back and forth tack, and then we can actually, unravel that internal pocket bag. We can actually carry on that stitch on the classic pocket right there. Now that pocket is sewn into place, we can just carry on back down that stitch externally for the internal pocket bag. I've already got the guide because I unstitched it. I can see where them sort of stitch marks were just next to the wax. You can either hide that stitch by pulling back the pocket and sewing underneath, or what I like to do is just do it over just because it looks kind of cool. Now that pocket is fully functioning perfectly, and we have sewn down that outside classic pocket too. I'm actually just going to do something that I wouldn't recommend again, and that is just to unpick slight part of the pocket, unpick a very slight part of the pocket at the bottom, and this doesn't interfere at all with that pocket bag either. And I'm going to grab that hammer holder, and I'm going to sew the hammer holder and just attach it to the bottom part of that pocket and connect it up to the side of our outseam. For this, you want to grab an iron, and I'm just going to do a little fold here. And then we want to turn it over and do another fold. And we're just pressing that together so that our folded edges are together and we have no sort of loose edges, as you can see when I close that. Then I'm going to run 2 stitches, one close to the edge of the folded part to close it, and one the other side for consistency. And then that is just going to slip right into the bottom of that pocket like this, and it's going to connect up to the side outseam, and that will be our hammer holder. So I figured it out, and I hope that you figured it out at this point of the tutorial too. I was a bit weird about the order of whether I was going to put the external pocket on before the pocket bag, because I knew I wanted to offset it a little bit, and I knew most of the pocket could be sewn down on the outside. It's just figuring out this small little area over here, but I've managed to do it so both these pockets open perfectly. However, as I mentioned, like, you can choose to do one of these pockets or the other, or you could have chosen to follow me and just basically do both like this, which I think is a really nice touch, having both pockets. Now we're going to do the exact same thing with the other one, and as you can see, the pocket bag of the internal pocket now functions as that little negative space that we cut out. It just covers that negative space and acts as if it's the top panel. So now we can do the exact same process as before and sew the bad sides together of the yoke and the back panel, and then do the flat fell seam. And then we will move on to constructing the workwear pocket on the other side, which I'll show you how to do. So, we're sat here about to finish the pair of shorts and the fabric has arrived, the selvedge denim. This is the original fabric that we were gonna make the pair of shorts out of, and it's some really nice Japanese selvedge denim. So I'm gonna remake the pair of shorts and I'm gonna do another tutorial. I'm gonna clip the Osmo onto the top of my head and I'm gonna do a POV video of me making a pair of selvedge denim shorts using the Keystone pattern. And either that has come out first or maybe this video has come out first, but either way there'll be two videos. Anyway, back to the tutorial. We'll save that for later. And I have the workwear pocket to put on, and that's gonna go right here. I'm then gonna put a few bits of hardware around, and then we're gonna connect the back rise together, which is this right here and that right there. And then that will be the full back of the shorts finished. So then it's just doing a flat fell seam on the inside seam, which is this, and it will all connect to the front, turning it inside out, stitching, top stitching the outside seam. So then the whole shorts are together. And then it's pretty much just attaching the waistband and hemming the bottom. It is a very quick process from here. I also do have this patch pocket. I'm not sure whether I will actually incorporate it onto this garment. I might save it and do that one in the next tutorial and just put it somewhere fun. So without further ado, we can move this panel to the side because it's finished, the one that we just did the pockets on. And we can look at this pocket right here. So basically both of these have facings. This one will be done first, so stitch all around, turn inside out, top stitch the hem, and then that will be placed on top of here. And then, you know, before you place it on top, you also want to do the same thing up here. So putting the facings on the hem, connecting this, which is the patch pocket of the workwear pocket, on top, stitching with a very small seam allowance all the way around to keep it in place, and then we are going to finish it off by attaching this, and then, you know, stitching all the way around, ironing, and then just pressing everything, and then we're going to place that finished pocket right up here, just like that, and it will sit really nicely. And then that'll be both the pockets done. So I'm probably not going to explain much of this because it's a lot of the same tutorial sort of structure as the rest of the video with the facings and the coin pockets and the classic pocket. So I'm actually going to just smash through this. Max is going to film the whole process, and then we will move straight on to the important part, which is connecting up everything and the waistband. So I've now finished sewing the workwear pocket, which I think actually looks really, really nice. I think we smashed it with the design on this. You've got like a little sort of little pocket out here. You've got a pen pocket there, which you can put your pens in, just like that. Then you've got the main compartment obviously back here, which is super nice. Now we're going to put the back rise together. So the way you want to do this is you basically want to pull the buckle out the way. So I'm going to pull it back and just pin it into place, so it doesn't get in the way of the sewing on the back rise. And you can do the exact same thing for the other side too. Just get a little pin and just pull it away, just like that. Now we're going to do what we've been doing for all of the flat fells, and that is putting the bad sides together and making sure that they all line up perfectly, which they do, which is great. And then we are going to stitch at a 1/4 all the way up, and then do the same fold and flat fell all the way up. I'm only going to throw like 3 pins in this just to hold it in place. You don't need to any more. But the only thing I would say is that you've got the stitching here from your yoke, and then you've got the stitching on the other side from your yoke. They need to line up. If they don't, your final end product will look a little bit messy. So I'm just going to throw a pin through that to keep that lined up like there, and then another pin at the top, just lining that up as well. And then we can kind of flip this over, and if there is any tiny bits of excess like this, it will probably give your flat felt a hard time. So we can grab some scissors and just trim that. And then stitching all the way along here, and then doing the fold flat felt that we've been doing for the whole time. Just one quick little thing right here is you're gonna have a lot of bulking around this flat felt that you're about to make, especially on this like bottom of this yoke part right here. So I recommend just grabbing a pair of scissors and literally just cutting the underneath of the direction you're folding. So say if I'm folding this way, so over the top, just like this, then cut a little bit of the underneath fabric so you get rid of a little bit of that bulking. You don't have to cut much, just a little bit, just like that. So it makes your fold over relatively easier. And then for this, if you want to iron it, you can. I might feel a bit more comfortable just throwing a few pins as I go in this and then ironing it after, trying to miss the pins. Mainly because we're in the territory of quite a lot of bulk around this area here. So we want to make sure that, you know, we can get it folded over. It might slightly overlap like that, but I think that looks really nice regardless. And then you can grab a hammer and sort of smash that down to the bulk stuff, so it makes it nice and easy for you when you're sewing and you don't break needles, which hopefully I don't do. So again, with this bottom part of the yoke, we want to keep this super straight. This is because when we connect it up to, you know, this right here is the inseam, all the way down the inside of the back panel. When we connect this inseam up to the front inseam, it needs to be super straight, otherwise you'll lose shape. So when you're doing the iron for the flat felt, I'm just going to straighten up some of these crinkles. When we flip that over, we want to keep it as straight as possible. So something along the lines of that right there. And then we can throw the iron in and keep that fold pretty consistent. Again, trying to hide that inside sort of thread. But yeah, something like that, and we'll throw some pins in. We can always sort of, you know, grab some tweezers and as we go sort of, you know, fold it over a bit more accurate when we're sewing the flat felt. So now we've done that flat felt throughout the whole back rise right there. We're actually going to do the exact same thing again, so bad sides together. I can flip over my front, turn it around, sort of straighten that out a little bit, and then we can get the bad side of the back, line up the two bottom seams of the back and front rise, make sure that there's a pin in between them so they line up perfectly, just like this, like that. And then you should be able to match it up all the way down to the bottom of the shorts. And you can choose to throw pins in this if you want. I'm going to just put one right there and then do the same on the other side. This is bad sides together because we're doing one more flat felt seam down the inseam, and then we'll be sewing at the out seam and not doing any flat felt and just doing a top stitch all the way down. But yeah, we're going to sew this exact same procedure. So again, I don't really need to say much for this, but we'll get it sorted, get it flat felled, and then we'll carry on with the waistband. So now we've just flat felled the inseam. We can actually just flip this up so good sides are facing each other, connecting up the top right corners. You can see that we're nearly getting there with a pair of shorts, which is nice. So we can sort of just focus in on one of the out seams. They're both going to be the exact same sort of procedure, but I just want to make sure that everything's lining up perfect and there's no bunching. We're going to throw some pins, making sure to keep our pocket bag out the way, but we're going to throw a few pins up this sort of out seam and just keep it nice and level all the way up so there's no bunching. And then we're going to stitch a 1/4 through this, and then after the 1/4 stitch, you know, all the way along is done, then we can turn it outside in and do like the right way up, and we can do the top stitch all along the edge all the way down. This is a pair of shorts. Normally if you've got a pair of trousers, it's an absolute nightmare to do the top stitch on the out seam because you've got to pull the whole garment through. But with shorts it's easier because they're obviously shorter, so you can sort of do that a little bit easier. So we're going to pin both sides and then we will do exactly that. Whilst doing this top stitch down, I always like to have my fold of the top stitch facing inwards to the front of the garment. The top stitch is like this and the front of the garment's over here. So basically all of the raw edge is folded underneath the back of the garment, and it just makes it all consistent with all your top stitching around the whole of the garment. So yeah, we've got the front of the garment over here and the fold is right under the back. But as I said with shorts, there's not too much fabric, so you can just kind of smash through it and then just keep moving it out the way. But with trousers, as you can imagine, obviously, there's so much more fabric and it gets smaller down towards your ankles, so it's really hard to hit this top stitch normally, but there we are, there's the end. Just hold it, pull it to the side, make sure it's pulled along. You can, otherwise you don't want to do your top stitch and it's all like, you know, halfway over the front garment like that. So just make sure you're pulling it as you do it also. Then same for the other side, but it's just on your opposite side. So when you're top stitching this, you've just got to top stitch the wrong side unless you want to start from the bottom of the garment, but I do not recommend that. So I'm going to hem the shorts now. So what I'm going to do is just do one singular fold, and you can use an iron for this, but I don't feel like I need to. I'm going to just do one singular fold and then one singular fold again on top of that. And then as I work my way around the garment, I'm going to keep it in line here with the 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm just going to run that all the way around. So now we finish hemming the bottom of the shorts, and we're working now on the waistband. So we can just move the shorts to the side for now. We'll touch bases on them in a second. Now the waistband, there is a few different variants and ways to do this. I actually have this panel here that's dropped on the floor, and it's the diamond belt channel facing and guide. I'm not going to show you how to do that in this tutorial, but the selvage denim tutorial for this pair of shorts I will. I'm also not going to show you how to do this right here, which is the fishtail kind of part of the waistband that goes up and then goes down again. I'm kind of folded that bit over, and I'm cutting a straight waistband with normal belt loops, which look exactly like this. So I'm going to show you how to cut the belt loops, do the belt loops, incorporate the belt loops into the waistband. I actually just filmed quite a bit of doing the diamond waistband and all of these different sort of techniques for a waistband for this pair of shorts. And to be honest, it's just so hot in here and things are just getting overwhelming. It kind of went wrong. So I've taken a few steps back and we're redoing the waistband, and I'm going to show you how to perfectly do it. Essentially, the first thing you're going to want to do is cut around your waistband. And something that I did earlier is I cut the waistband to my exact size. And by cutting it to the exact size, you trim a little bit off the end. There is an extension on the end of this waistband around 4 to 5 inches, and that is accounting for the fireman extension on the shorts. That makes the waistband slightly longer. I cut it down to my size. We had problems with that with the prior waistband that I've just built. So I'm going to add some extra length to this, and I'm going to show you how to do it, how to sew it together and just make a perfect, just normal classic waistband. It's still going to have the extension because we do have the fireman extension on the shorts. So let's get to work. So what you want to do is you want to unpin all your paper if you're following me and doing the same waistband. Unpin the paper, and we're just going to run a 1/4 inch stitch all the way across the top of the waistband. I've added a little bit more seam allowance to this waistband, so you don't need to, but I wanted a higher sort of waistband. If you are doing the diamonds, I would recommend adding a 1/2 inch above and below, but the other tutorial will mention all of this. I've just gone with a taller waistband just because I wanted to. So anyway, I'm gonna throw a few pins in this, but you don't need many. We're gonna stitch all the way along the top of this waistband with a 1/4 seam allowance, and then I'm actually going to press the seam open all the way along, and that just makes it easier for us to actually iron the waistband round, and sort of so the good sides are facing outwards a bit later. It's going to make it cleaner for us and easier for us to manipulate later. So I'm going to run the 1/4 along this. So when we're also attaching this waistband to the garment, we're going to want to leave a little gap where we start stitching on the side of the waistband. So we're going to run and focus on the 1/4 all the way along the longer lengthways. However, once we've pressed it, we don't want to turn the whole thing inside out and then top stitch, because we need to close the sides of the waistband, like these smaller sort of, you know, sides of the rectangle. So we want to start stitching, I'd say, around like this point right here. This is because we will attach one side of the waistband, i.e. this one, to the garment, and then we'll flip the whole waistband over, fold the other side so it matches. That might not make sense to you right now, but just follow my lead with the 1/4 and I'll explain the rest. Now the 1/4 stitch that we just made, we can kind of open up the waistband and run a press, opening up this seam all the way along the waistband. So we can just run this press all the way along. And this is just separating these two seams. It's making it easier for us later on down the line, be able to get that really even top sort of fold and the top stitch along the waistband. So we're going to keep that going all the way through the waistband. Now, before we end up stitching this to the garment, we actually need to turn this back the way it was, the way we just sewn it. And we want to do that thing that I just said, where you want to start about a 1/2 inch up, sewing the good sides of the waistband together. Start about a 1/2 inch up, back and forth tack, and then follow it all the way up to the line, back and forth tack, and then sort of cut your threads, and then do the exact same thing for the other side. So about a 1/2 inch, back and forth tack, all the way up, back and forth tack. So basically we've just done the back and forth tack about a 1/2 inch from the bottom. The reason we're keeping this bottom piece open, so, you know, 1/2 inch sort of stitch, starting all the way down to the end, back and forth stitch, and then I just cut the corners for us turning it inside out. But the reason we're leaving this open is because we're going to attach one side to the garment and then flip the whole waistband inside out, the right way up, and then use the other side to fold and stitch down. You'll see in a second. So we're actually turning this inside out now, and just because you've ironed this seam, it'll be super nice to iron down, and you won't get loads of like sort of bunched up areas. It should all press down pretty naturally all the way along. We can grab the iron and just double down on this. I don't know if you noticed, but I haven't actually closed this end of the waistband. I'm going to do that once we've sewn it to the garment, just because I ended up cutting off the end of the paper waistband pattern, so I've just done it extra long, and then I'm going to trim it down at the end. But you should have followed the guide, like how big to make the waistband depending on whether you've got the fireman extender or not. I'm basically now just going to connect the good side of the inside waistband to the bad side of the fireman sort of extender, so we can run it all the way along, or you can alternatively just do it the other direction too. So I've not got the other side open, so I'm just going to connect the waistband up to the bad side of the zip fly shield, and then just connect that fold up right to that end, and we're just going to stitch this waistband all the way around. So just to repeat again, it's the good side of the inside waistband panel, and we're connecting that up with the fly shield bad side, and we're going to stitch that all the way along. So as I mentioned, I cut my waistband a tiny bit longer than anticipated, And as you can see, the end of our fireman extender is there and our waistband goes all the way up. Yours will be perfect, but mine isn't because I just cut the paper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add an extra sort of 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch to the end of the waistband, and then I'm actually going to cut the waistband in half right here, just like that. Throw the excess away, and what we're going to do is we're going to carry on the stitch that we're making over here all the way down, but we're going to fold the end of the waistband. So fold it so it matches up perfectly just there with the end of the fireman extender, just like that. And we're actually just going to run the stitch all the way along and then right off the end. Little back and forth tack. And now you can see that that has basically sewn the waistband onto the inside of the garment. And obviously we haven't sewn it onto the outside, but now we know we've got a perfect length of the waistband. And I'm actually just going to press that like 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch fold down so it's nice and flat, just like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the corner of the table as a guide so I can just press down this waistband on the inside of the garment, just making sure that, you know, it looks super clean all the way around. Just pressing this down. We can kind of move it around the table and just get this press looking clean all the way around the garment. And your loose sort of threads, all of this, the top of your main pair of shorts and the waistband, they should be facing upwards. So when you're doing this iron, the sort of top stitch fold should be faced upwards. It just really helps with the top stitch of when you're about to incorporate the front waistband panel. So all of the loose edges are facing upwards. We're just going round all the way to the end, making sure it has a really nice press. And now what we should be able to do, because we press that inside seam of the waistband, we should be able to really nicely just fold it over and it should sit perfectly just like this. So what I like to do, just for the second before we throw any type of top stitch in it, I'm just going to throw a pin in there like this, and I'm going to throw a few across the waistband. So I'm going to visually show you what I've just done over the last like 5-10 minutes, just so you can make perfect sense of it. Essentially, we have sewn the good side of the inside waistband to the bad side of our main pair of shorts. And then what we have done is we've ironed that so that the loose edge is facing upwards. So that means that now when we fold the waistband the right way, you can see that we've got a perfect, really clean top of the waistband, and we have excess fabric hanging over the pair of shorts now. Quite a lot of excess fabric, which is a good thing. What we're gonna do is if I pull this excess fabric away and bring my scissors so I can show you, there's a stitch line all the way along, and that is the exact stitch line that you stitch the inside waistband panel to the pair of shorts. So now what we can do is manually fold the outside waistband and just place it over the top of that stitch. That stitch right there, it needs to be over the top of that stitch. So if I reveal it, you can see there's a stitch line, but this fold needs to sit over the top of this stitch. I'll show you, because when we throw a pin in, I can turn this over and it perfectly sits on the inside of the waistband right there. So you're going to do that all the way along this waistband. And what I'm going to do after doing that is I'm going to show you how to build these belt loops. And as we go to sew around this, we can actually integrate the belt loops into the waistband as we go. And then I'll show you how to obviously stitch them in a second. But for now, just work your way around, take it slow, use pins, and make sure you've pinned this waistband in perfectly. Also, if you've got like an edge of a table like I have here, it's a lot easier because when you're laying this fabric down on the table, you might accidentally like not line it up correctly or pin through both layers of waistbands. You can kind of put one under, and having that corner of the table really just helps to flatten everything down and get that fold sort of perfect. And then you can throw a pin in, and then you can keep going with this fold all the way around. Now, as I said, we're going to be including our belt loops into the places where we want them to be. So as soon as you've finished doing this fold and pin all the way around, we are going to grab our belt loops and I'm going to show you how to make them. So I've now pinned all of this sort of front of the waistband over the stitch line that I told you to pin it over. Maybe I could add one more here. And essentially, I'm now going to show you how to integrate the belt loops. I've actually done quite a thick waistband, as I said. The reason I've done this is just to visually show you that now if you were to add the diamonds, it would be a little bit more space for them to sit. The previous waistband I did, I'm actually going to quickly show you because it's literally awful and I would never want to put this in a tutorial, but here we go. I just didn't allow enough space at the top of the diamond, so you can see it's like integrated itself into the top of the waistband. And yeah, it didn't look very good. So for the diamond sort of stuff, you're going to need to cut a larger waistband. So I thought I'd give you a good example of that. However, I'm still going to integrate these normal belt loops. What you're going to do is you're going to do a fold in and then another fold, but make sure that second fold sits in the middle. And then I just like to run one stitch down the middle of the belt loop and it just closes up all the frayed edges. But it will look something along the lines of that right there. The dimensions of this belt loop is 8 by 2.5. It's what I usually do for belt loops. Sometimes I do 8 by 3 depending on how thick I want them, but you want to do essentially a fold like this. You can iron that down. And then the second fold you do, it should just be something along the lines of this. And then the smaller fold can sort of just sit right in the middle, just something like that. I can bring that over to the machine like so, and I can pretty much just run a single stitch all the way down. And that'll just close it up right there, and that looks super clean. I like to incorporate the belt loop into the waistband at the bottom, just like that, and then fold it over, top stitch it, and then do the same with the top. But I'll show you that in a second. I'm now going to stitch around this waistband, and I'm going to just stitch super close to that edge all the way along, taking the pins out as I go. But you'll hit a point like here where you kind of want a belt loop. So I've prepared 5 of them belt loops, and I'm going to slide one in right here and just keep sewing along, and then I'll show you how to close them up in a second. And where we want to implement a belt loop, like I said, we can just slide it in and carry on that stitch all the way around. A little back and forth tack, and then we'll keep the stitch going. So I'm going to show you how to basically apply this belt loop so it connects to the top of the waistband. Obviously we've sewn it into the waistband now, so what it's going to do is it's going to fold up just like this, and then it's going to fold in again and just connect to the very top of the waistband like that. So what we want to do is we just want to run a little stitch to sort of solidify the spot that it's going to fold up, front and back. And then we're going to do the exact same thing but on the top again. And then we're going to do the exact same thing to the top part of the belt loop up here. So you can now see that that is the belt loop incorporated into the waistband, and I think it looks really, really nice. I really like this beige like sort of waistband with the belt loop, and it sort of, you know, comes down into the pocket facing, and then everything else downwards is brown. I was worried that it was going to be a bit like a certain theme, but now it's fully completed. I'm really happy with how it's looking, which is nice. So I'm going to smash through the other belt loops, and then we will be completely finished, other than just adding a button to the waistband. But I will mention something about the button after we just finish this belt loop, because it is equally as important too. So I'll do the belt loops and then I'll say one more thing, and then we'll showcase the finished product. And there we have it. We've just pretty much finished the shorts. There is 2 more things I wanted to mention. Basically, because you've got this extended waistband on the pair of shorts, you probably want to do a little hidden button here. and then there being a button sort of opening right here. This is mainly so it keeps the structure, and you know, the most pressure that you're going to give a pair of shorts or a pair of jeans is probably around that sort of like front waistband area. So you want to put like a little hidden button which you can incorporate on the inside panel of the waistband here, connect that in the middle of where the fly is, and then you can actually put another button just on the top here. I was kind of stupid and just didn't think. I've just put the belt loop right there, so I'm probably going to either move that belt loop to here so it's on this waistband, or just move it over a little bit to here, whatever works. But yeah, I'm very happy with them. I'm going to try them on, and you should have some like overlays going over the screen of them being tried on and what they fit like. As I mentioned before, this wasn't the plan with the original fabric. I wasn't planning on doing it with this sort of fabric, and it kind of looks like that sort of German lederhosen kind of vibe, which I'm not unhappy about at all. I think when I added that beige waistband, I think it sort of pulls away from that vibe a little bit. But either way, they look really, really cool. They've got the pleats down the front, which I'm really happy with. Pleats on both sides, which is great. All of these sort of detailed stitch marks, the fireman's sort of, you know, extension, the belt loops, the coin pockets look amazing, even though one's not functional because I was being an idiot and stitched through it. And then if you flip them over, that actually looks sick. I'm very happy with that. And whilst we're here, I'm just going to show you how you would attach this right here. So I've got a little buckle. It should say in the pattern how wide you need to get your hardware. And the smaller side, I would just throw it through, fold it over, and then stitch that with a back and forth tack. In fact, I'm going to do that right this second. Just a little back and forth tack like that, making sure to cut any excess threads. Then we can sort of bring it back over. And as you can see, you should be able to throw the other side through and then push that down and then back through once more. And that right there is what is going to create your yoke cinch, just like that. And I think that looks really, really nice. The workwear pocket over here is super nice too. I'm very happy with how you've got your pen pocket, this sort of shape in the patch pocket, this sort of shape up here where it's sort of squared off, the diagonaled off over here. The same with the classic pocket, and I'm really happy we were able to nicely sort of integrate the classic pocket in and still have that internal pocket functional as well, which is really nice. Hammer holder, perfect hem on the bottom. I'm pretty damn happy with these. That is the Keystone denim shorts, although unfortunately I didn't make them out of denim. But if you tune into the next video, or it might actually be out by the time you're watching this, we do have Japanese salvage denim, and I'm going to make the craziest pair of these out of salvage denim. So stay tuned, and thank you for tuning in as always. As I always mention in these videos, we're building like the craziest artillery of like 25 to 30 patterns at the moment, and they're all available on the website for $15.95, or you can buy the bundles, you can get the full workwear collection, you can get whatever you want. So it is completely down to you. I'm very proud of them. There is tutorials and YouTube videos coming out for the next probably 4 months weekly. So every single week at Tuesday 6 PM there's a brand new YouTube video dropping. A lot of vlogs, a lot of travel sewing on the go. I take my domestic machine to different countries, so a lot of that coming. And then in between that there's loads of tutorials that we've stacked up. And then this is one of them. And then there's another tutorial coming for like the field jacket. Basically just stay tuned. I'm not going to keep you for any longer. I'll see you soon in a bit.